Today I've got a very interesting guest. It's author Peter Hedges, and we'll be talking about his new novel from Dutton, The Heights. Now, Peter is the author of What's Eating Gilbert Grape, which he later adapted into a film with Johnny Depp and Leonardo DiCaprio. I'm sure many of you out there are familiar with that. He went on to write many screenplays and was nominated for an Oscar. Now, this is his first novel in 12 years, so we're pretty excited about it. Peter lives in Brooklyn Heights, the location of his novel, and I'm talking to him at his home in New York. Peter, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's nice to be here by phone.
Well, nice to have you here by phone.
It'd be nice to be there in person, but we'll take the phone.
But absolutely. Well, Peter, my first question is that you live in Brooklyn and the Heights, but you're still referred to in your work as an Iowa writer. And how does Iowa still affect your work?
Well, I can't speak for anyone else, but those early years, those 0 to 18 years, where we grow up, are I probably remain the most important years of my life. And I grew up in West Des Moines, Iowa, and I think a lot of how I view the world and how I move through the world as an adult was shaped then and there.
Did you go to school in Iowa also? Did you go to university there?
No. When I was in high school and junior high, I wanted to be an actor. And so I went off to the University of North Carolina School of the Arts in Winston-Salem, where I trained to be an actor. Mm-hmm. And judging from the fact that you know nothing of my acting work, it gives you some idea how that all went.
Well, but I'm sure that helps your creativity also.
Oh, no, I think it helped me a great deal because I started writing plays. That was the first real creative writing I did, was writing plays for my friends to act in. Mm-hmm. And I went to school with some remarkable actors. So I had the great good fortune to be writing plays on a Thursday, and then we'd rehearse them on a Friday and perform them on a Saturday.
What fun. It
was a great time.
It's interesting, too, how life takes you, because here Iowa has a reputation. Isn't it the University of Iowa that has a good writing program?
Workshop.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the most important.
Absolutely.
Well, for writers to learn to write.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can go there from time to time as a
I pass
visitor.
through. I'll be going to Iowa City on my next week, in fact.
Terrific.
It's a great town, and with a great bookstore, Prairie Lights. But I didn't have the good sense to go there. I think I'd probably be better at what I do if I'd gone, but I didn't.
Well, you're doing great. So why don't we start by giving our audience an overview of the story of The Heights?
Well, The Heights is a story of a good marriage of two ordinary people who have a great ordinary love. And what happens when an extraordinary couple, a highly visible, rather wealthy couple, move into the community where Tim and Kate Welch live? And this couple, particularly the woman in this extraordinary coupling, sets her sights on Tim and Kate. She becomes rather enthralled with them, and I wanted to write about a good marriage that endures or attempts to endure an unthinkable test. So that's what I set out to do, and that's the book I wrote.
Well, it's wonderfully written, and that goes without saying, I think. But my next question, though, is that it's taken 12 years for the book to be completed, and you, like many authors, started the book in 1998, and then the tragedy of 9/11. How did that affect the work on your novel?
Well, interestingly enough, sadly, because I, of course, live in Brooklyn Heights, in my office, I walk out the door and walk 25 yards and I'm standing on the promenade. So we have the most exquisite view of Lower Manhattan, and we had that most horrific view on 9/11.
Oh, my.
So I was writing a tragedy. I was actually writing my attempt at a Madame Bovary type of novel. And after 9/11, my idea of what tragic was and is was changed. Many of my neighbors didn't come home. My son's best friend's father wasn't there to pick him up from school. And I decided I put my book away for a bit. And when I came back to it a year or so later, I decided that what was at stake in this story wasn't necessarily tragic, but it was deeply human. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to bring a bit more humor into all of my writing since 9/11. I feel that we could laugh more and the world could feel a little lighter. So the book morphed into human comedy, human being an important component because it does have its dark and sad moments. But I just didn't feel it warranted its tragic ambition that I had for it.
Yes, and I'm sure that you know personally many writers that had that same reaction, that it stopped their work, they couldn't go on with it, and
I think that's right. If we aren't affected by these big moments, then we've lost touch.
Absolutely.
And I think we're all trying to figure out what's the story that we need to tell, and that people need to be told, or would like to be told, or would be most useful in these early bumpy and broken years of the 21st century.
Well, then we had a plunge in the economy when you were writing the story.
Correct.
So what effect did that have then? Did you have to revamp some more? Or?
Well, I did, but the bigger issues that I think required my taking longer to finish this book were not so much the changing economy, but trying to understand what happens when two people who love each other, when one withholds a piece of information from the other, and how that can snowball. My dad, who's an Episcopal priest, when he read the book, said, "Well, Peter, you know what they say about sheep." He said, "Sheep get lost one blade of grass at a time." Mm-hmm. And he said, "It's not my original thought, but it's what I felt when I was reading the book, that Tim and Kate are losing their way one blade of grass at a time." And so, but the change in the economy definitely affected the book too, because I started writing this story in 1998 when the biggest problem seemingly that we faced was the curious sexual life of our president.
Right.
The Cold War was over,
right.
The economy was booming. I mean, it was a much simpler time. And so one of the aspects of the book that I had in the character of Kate, because Tim is a history teacher and who has the weight of history and the knowledge of history to help guide him through the choices he makes. Kate is a futurist. She's a scenario creator. And the Kate I imagined in 1998 was a nervous mother, was someone who worried that what was going to happen to the future in terms of her children. And she was worried about all sorts of things that before 9/11 were certainly on my mind, and I think she was a bit ahead of the curve.
Yeah, probably.
She knew what was going to happen in the world. And one of the things I miss is that in this euphoria that was happening in the late 90s, Kate was ahead of the curve. Well, the world caught up to Kate, so I had to modify a bit what Kate's job would be once she went back to work, and Tim stayed home with the kids for that year where all these troubles began too.
Well, and the other thing that was going on with you in those 12 years too, and before the Heights, you were writing screenplays as well.
That's
during
correct.
that period, And I think I know the answer because I asked this of many authors, but I'd like you to verbalize it. How has working on screenplays affected your novels?
Well,
The writing of your novels?
No, it's a great question in a number of ways. One, when I'm writing a novel now, I try to truly relish the parts of the novel writing experience that are impossible when writing a screenplay. And that would be the deep and wonderful exploration of how people think. Thought in a novel, being able to listen to what people are working through. And now, Shakespeare, of course, was great, the greatest dramatist of all time, and he had a great capacity to take thought in those, like To Be or Not to Be, or any of the great soliloquies, and articulate thought in a very particular way. Well, I've come to know that I'm not Shakespeare, sadly, but I do relish when I'm writing a novel what I can't do in a screenplay. At the same time, with a screenplay, every page something has to happen.
Right.
And that, because they cost so much to make, and an audience gets impatient, they'll turn the channel. If it's on television or if it's in a movie theater, they'll slip out and go into another theater. So you need something to keep happening. And you also achieve an economy in your writing that I think has been useful in my prose writing, because I am aware, as most of my fellow writers are, of the incredible number of options a reader has now. All the technologies and all the mediums for content distribution that are craving our attention. So I feel the best chance I have, and the contract I try to make with my readers, is that if you read my book, you can know that I went over it and over and over it. I streamlined it. I took out anything that wasn't essential. If everything needs to matter and count.
Right, and in reading the book, it's a very visual story as well. I can see, as I read it, I can see the characters, I can see the setting, and I think that helps a lot too. Just briefly, you wrote the screenplay for Gilbert Grape, and that's a story that takes place in Iowa. Was it that film for which you received an Oscar nomination?
No.
Oh,
no,
darn.
The nomination I received was for my work on a film called About a Boy, which is an adaptation of a Nick Hornby novel.
Oh, I
that
see.
Chris and Paul Weitz
Right.
also wrote on, and they directed the film as well. So I was the first writer, and they came on and added their imprint on my work, and then they directed the film, and they did a wonderful job, and I benefited greatly and got to sit with them at the Oscars.
Well, that's neat. Congratulations on that. I have to say I haven't read that book or seen the film, so I have to make a point of...
It's a very sweet film.
Yeah, and Hornby is certainly a great writer.
Yeah, one of the things when I adapt novels, and I've adapted several now, I try to pick a novel that I greatly admire, a writer whose prose I like to swim around in for a year and a half. And I feel that not only has screenwriting helped me become a better writer, but getting to live inside these novels that I didn't write, but that I'm trying to help midwife, if you will,
right.
from being a novel to a film.
I think what I'd like to ask you now is, what was it about living in the Heights that inspired you to write about it?
I love where I live, and it's one of the most beautiful communities I can imagine. The history in the buildings, it was the first historic district, I believe, in America, certainly in New York City. So there's been a great effort made to preserve the 19th century brownstones, and the light is exquisite, and the people are kind, and I think in some respects it was also a matter of convenience that I was doing so much film writing, and I knew the minute I finished An Ocean in Iowa that I wanted to start a third novel. And I think I just thought to myself, well, I'll set it here so I don't have to look far for inspiration. And at that time, my kids were quite young. I spent a lot of time in playgrounds and at birthday parties and, in the Children's Museum in Manhattan and doing all the things that parents of small children do. And while I knew that people would assume I was writing about my marriage and my life, I don't do that. But I certainly wrote about a couple that I would love to be friends with, that I could imagine them going through what they went through and what they go through in the story.
I am sorry.
Oh, you okay?
Had a little allergy reaction there. Forgive me.
No, we're good.
Okay. You said that it cost you emotionally to write this story. What did you mean by that?
What I mean is that... Oh, I'm getting a call, so I'm not going to answer it, of course. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, we're each having our little situations here. Well, that's what makes show business more interesting, I think. So I'll cough. You ignore the phone.
We'll just let this call fade.
Okay. All right.
I think it's gone. Okay. So your question was...
We're talking about, that you were quoted as saying that it cost you emotionally to write the story. And I wanted to know what you meant by that.
While I'm not Tim, I'm a happily married man. And while I'm not Kate, I'm married, I'm married to an equally remarkable woman. And in imagining how they get lost and investing in this imaginary relationship, I came to face my own issues and ideas of what marriage is, what it means to be forthright. Is there such a thing as excessive truth-telling? When is it kind to lie? What is the cost of a withheld piece of information? And I also knew in writing the book that I would face, once I published it, I find your question very fair, but I've had some questions that I feel are,
intrusive?
Yes, intrusive.
Sure.
And because the lines between fiction and reality have become so blurred that and it seems as if something has more weight and more import if it actually happened.
I understand what you're saying.
But,
right.
But by imagining what could happen to Tim and Kate, I had to own in myself what I was capable of. And one of the great gifts of being a writer, at least getting to write the kinds of stories, or choosing to write the kinds of stories I choose to write, is that each time I write something, it irrevocably alters me. And if I don't feel that it will, I tend to not write it. So my idea of marriage has been changed. My idea of the fragility of something that can feel so strong and impenetrable is heightened now. But also, I'm reminded through the telling of this story how resilient people are, and if two people really want to work through something, even though it may not make sense to anybody else, why they're choosing each other or why they're choosing to hang in there, they can.
Yes. Well, it seems to me that any writer is bound to be affected or get something out of it or give something to it. And I've had many writers say similar things to what you are saying right now.
Right.
And the fact that if an issue is not meaningful or important enough to you, that you probably won't even go there. And I think a writer has to have that sort of reaction.
Yes, I think to not have that reaction would be troubling. If you're not a bit nervous, if you're not at times giddy at the thought of where you're going, or if you're not deeply moved or frightened or amused, if it's not affecting you in a deep way, then there's really, how can I ever expect that it's going to have any impact on a reader?
Right. But in the telling of the story, are you concerned with the impact on the reader? Because that also can affect your writing. If you're concerned about how the reader's going to react, if you overdo that, then that can affect the way the story goes. So,
I'm certainly not. I know people who don't care about their audience.
Right.
I mean, and they're very proud of it, and they often win very big awards. And if I care a great deal about my audience, and maybe I care too much, but I feel like there's so much vying for our time, and again, if I'm going to ask you to spend some time in this fictional world of the Heights, or What's Eating Gilbert Grape, or see a film that I've been a part of, then I better have done everything I can to make it be the most exquisite and complete piece of work possible. So and to that end, I do think about how it and Adrian Rich says a lie is a shortcut through another person. And I mean, it's an odd thing to say about fiction, because fiction's all a lie. It's all made up.
Right.
But it's not really a lie because it's called fiction. So
right.
So in a sense, I'm not lying. We're very clearly saying this is made up. But the hope is that it will be meaningful. I mean, I know no one in my circle who I eat dinner with who is a writer that will say, "Gee, I don't really care if people like what I do, or I don't even not that is that after you experience this novel or anything I'm a part of, that you won't necessarily go, "Wow, that's a really good book. He's a really writer." The real you compliment you can pay a writer is when you finish their work, that you actually begin to talk about your own life, or how this part of that exchange, which is the conversation that will come from the experience of the work. That genuinely is what I'm after, and so I tend to end my stories at a point where, with possibility that in the readers that most are involved in connecting to this material will have hopefully have that kind of conversation, either with a loved one or a friend or with themselves.
Exactly. Well, now you're working on another novel, and you're finishing up a screenplay.
Yes, I just finished it last Sunday.
Well, good. Okay, so that's good. That part is finished. But now, are we going to have to wait another 12 years for the novel, or are things moving along? Or
I think I can't imagine it will take 12 years. This next one, but I know this that I hope it won't be 12 years. But if it, because I do my film work and I don't make my living as a novelist, I can afford, at least today, to not publish until the book feels absolutely ready.
Yes, and you're the only one that can decide that, unless
Right.
the publisher is really
But I hope to publish again and soon.
Okay, well, we're going to look forward to that novel. I want to ask you about the fact you mentioned it briefly that you did adapt other screenplays from books by Hornby, as you mentioned, Jane Hamilton, and one of my personal favorites, Jonathan Tropper. Have any of those? Well, we know that Hornby's.
No, we
was
did a map of
released.
the world with Sigourney Weaver and Julianne Moore. It came out in
Uh-huh.
1999. The Jonathan Tropper novel that I was so blessed to get to adapt is called Everything Changes. It's a
right.
wonderful book.
Yes, yes.
And I have a script, and I'm attached to direct it.
Oh,
So
neat.
I'm hoping to make that anytime soon. Right now, at this particular moment in the history of American cinema, it's a very hard time
Yes.
to get this kind of
Yes.
story made, a human story that has a lot of humor but a lot of heart. It's not a broad comedy, and it's not a big action film, and it's certainly not going to be shot in 3D.
Yeah,
So
right.
It's just one of those moments where it's a little, it's tougher than normal. It's always difficult to tell this kind of story. It's particularly hard now, but I'm committed to it. I learned a lot working on that project. I love his writing.
I do too, and quite honestly, I think those are the stories that we're all looking for to go to the
I
movies
think
and see.
there's such a big ache for that kind of story.
Absolutely.
Where the humor is not making fun of other people, but it's actually the laughter of identification, where you go, that could be me, or I wish that was me, as opposed to I'm not like that, or I would never do this. And I feel that, to get to work on Jonathan's book was just a real thrill. And I'm very proud of that adaptation, and so I'm hoping to get that made.
Well, I look forward to that, and I certainly look forward to your next book, and I hope that you are going to come back and talk to me about it, and I do hope it's not in another 12 years. However, whenever that book is out, I'd like to chat with you about
that'll
it.
be fun.
So I'm sorry to say that we are out of time, but I thank you so much for being
Thank you,
with
Jacqueline.
us.